The presentation that follows has been created to help church communities better understand the link between mental illness and substance abuse and how to more effectively respond. This presentation is also directed to service providers so that they might better understand the role spirituality plays in the lives of African Americans and how spirituality can be a vital part of recovery for those struggling with mental illness and substance abuse.
I started using drugs when I was about 16 years old. I just, got with some friends and we would play a little basketball, and then after we would finish the basketball, we would go get beers together. And one thing led to another. The alcohol led to marijuana. Marijuana led to pills. The pills led to cocaine. And before I knew it, I had lost like 15, 17 years of my life, all to drugs and alcohol.
I felt very like no self-confidence. I had no self-confidence. So with it, drugs and alcohol, I got a little self-confidence that made me more of a talkative person, to meet more friends, like, things like that. But just to be with the in-group. Like I said, I didn't know I had a mental illness. I was just going along with the crowd, and then, it sort of came into a mental illness. It was when I first got diagnosed. That was part of, they said I had a mental illness and I didn't know about it.
Reverend Rose Hardy, an assistant pastor and also a mental health professional, has counseled hundreds of troubled people in the African American community. She shares her experiences with troubled teens and discusses her observations about why people start their downward spiral into addiction.
It became so apparent to me that as they were able to talk in psychotherapy and open up about what was going on in their lives, that before they reached for that first joint or before they did that first line or picked up a pipe, there were things going on that they needed relief. So it's not surprising that sometimes folk will say, well, everything was okay until I started using that substance. The reality is that there was something, I believe, that led to reaching for that substance.
Reverend Smalls, pastor of the Imani Baptist Church in East Orange, New Jersey, has been counseling inmates for 38 years. He talks about treating our children with respect and providing a secure home while they are growing up. In the absence of security, many children are traumatized at an early age and spiral down as they grow up, escaping into alcohol and substance abuse, and eventually, for some, violence.
Where there is security, where there is a supportive environment, where there is family support, where there is an absence of hunger and anxiety, then of course you have a more balanced, a child better equipped to deal with the traumatic influences that come in a violent-prone world. We find that just by talking to men and women in prison, that they will point to the fact that their insecurities go back as far as early childhood. Oftentimes abuse has its incubation in early childhood.
But our community is being challenged from every direction, and lack of opportunity leads the list. It's no surprise that so many young people in the African American community do not complete high school or go on to college, and that substance abuse and mental illness are more prevalent.
The factors that make for personal disorganization are the factors that are prevailing in poverty, in impoverished areas. overcrowding housing conditions, loosely woven family fabrics, the schools, unsuccessful careers in the public school system, unemployment, those impoverishing, debilitating experiences make for that kind of disorganization. And so we're finding out today in the schools, disruptive behavior, it comes to school with the student. The behavior is a result of unresolved tensions that the child has at home. So mental illness is the big problem that this society faces, because children are threatened in every quarter.
Clarence Miller, a counselor in a psychiatric emergency service, shares his own story about childhood abuse and how it shaped his life.
When I was 5, I was sexually abused by a cousin. And for a long time, it was taboo. You didn't talk about that, especially men. Men don't talk about that, and what I did was suppress it. I did other things. But I found that I was more aggressive and I was more angry. So I went through and I lived what they would call, I guess, a functional normal life up until that point. It wasn't until I got into treatment, when I got into treatment, that I discovered, how much it had affected me. And then to find out that my sisters and my brothers had also been sexually abused too. Unfortunately for them, they didn't seek treatment. And today, they're really struggling.
My lowest point was about 4 o'clock in one morning. All the clubs closing, all the drugs gone, all the money's gone, nowhere to go, no one to turn to. It was such a low point in my life that all I had was the clothes on my back, which didn't belong to me. I can remember saying, man, I don't want to do this anymore. I cannot continue to do this.
I had a moment where I didn't have any money at all and I couldn't get none from anyone, so I went out in the street and started prostituting. That was the lowest. I never thought I would ever do that, but that was the lowest. I had to degrade myself, already degrading from using drugs and alcohol, but this was the lowest I ever put myself in.
There are plenty of reasons to start abusing drugs and alcohol, but stopping is more difficult. The challenge for both service providers and faith-based communities is to recognize those reasons and that mental illness might be involved, and more effectively intervene to help people who are ready to be helped begin to stop their substance abuse. Reverend Hardy talks about the important role the church has to play in this crisis intervention.
The church needs to embrace that healthcare is a critical component to people's wellness and recovery. Mental illness is a disease. It's an illness. And like with any other illness, people need to seek out treatment that will work for them. And the church can usher people to that place. The church can play a huge role in bringing people to a place where now they can get that other piece to the puzzle, so that if it's depression or an anxiety disorder, that you don't have to feel that choosing medical care is a lack of faith.
We need to re-examine the assumptions we hold about helping people. Starting with a one-on-one relationship, healthcare providers are an important step for those suffering with substance abuse and mental illness. Counselor Clarence Miller talks about a one-on-one encounter and its outcome.
I had a resident when I first came to Project Live. He had just relapsed, and he was at a point in his life where he didn't want to listen to anybody. So when I came on duty the first couple of days, he was very, resistant toward me, until I sat him down one day and told him, I said, you know what, I've been where you've been. And he looked at me, you've been where I've been. What are you talking about? I said, yeah, I'm a recovering addict too. At that time I had maybe 15 years clean and sober. And I started to relate to them how I had lost everything, how I was homeless, how I was terribly addicted, and how I had no hope, how I would relapse just like he did. But at the same time, I told him, I said, after a while, I got tired. You get tired of being tired. Eventually, he got clean and sober. Eventually, he turned his life around. And today, as we speak, he is now 7 years clean and sober. He has his own apartment. He has his own car. He's driving, and he's doing very well. He's attending meetings, and he's on the road to being a counselor himself.
A very good friend of mine who had found recovery about 5 years prior. And he always told me, he says, I'm here for you. If you ever, think about doing some things different, here's my number and call me anytime. And I said, my God, if I can get a little bit of what he has, I'm going to be all right. Because what I saw in him was, I was attracted by his peace, serenity, his wellness. He seemed content, and I wanted that.
Twice I went into a detox, and I did good for a year, and then I thought I had it good and had it all together, but I didn't because I relapsed. But after I relapsed, and not so long after that, I got a rude awakening, a spiritual awakening. And ever since that day, I've been clean and sober for 5 years, 5 months, and a week.
There is a need to better inform people in both the religious community and professional community about how each group is approaching a troubled person. Both communities need to understand how the other is dealing with mental illness and substance abuse.
We need to come together as service providers and religious institutions to be able to deliver the correct information to people so that they can access health care and feel safe with it. Because for a lot of people in our communities, in communities of color, they don't feel safe around health care. There have been times that health care and the service providers have fallen short.
And falling short is not an option when the person's life is at stake. Church communities need to be better equipped and truly understand that they have an important role in potentially life-saving interventions. Laverne Williams, the community outreach educator for the Mental Health Association in New Jersey, speaks about a program called Pews, which has been created by the Mental Health Association to help churches create Pews ministries to better recognize and assist people suffering from the co-occurring disorders of mental illness and substance abuse. The Pews program offers answers about how to respond to people challenged with a mental illness.
The Pews program actually, first of all, stands for Promoting Emotional Wellness and Spirituality. And so it's to educate faith leaders about persons who may be or at risk of having a mental illness in the congregation. But if somebody is suffering from a mental illness, no one quite knows what to do with that person. And I think probably a lot of churches will be made to say, well, if somebody's disruptive and if they have to call the authorities on them, that's about the last thing you want to do, is to call the police department for someone who was just actually having a psychiatric problem, but you don't know where else to lead them to. And I think this is what the Pews program was trained to do, to teach clergy about what to do in the case of a crisis and where to go in your community.
With a goal of bringing service providers and church communities together, the Pews program is informing both sides in a clear way about the important role each is playing in a person's recovery.
My goal is to bring the clergy together with service providers and almost do what we call like a roundtable discussion. Let clergy ask all the questions they would ask of the service provider. Let service providers maybe hear and learn about what pastors or clergy are saying from their pulpits to persons with a mental illness. Or what are they saying about mental illness, period? Are they saying, well, this is something that is a result of sin? Are they saying, well, this is something that you just need to pray harder about and you can get over it? What are they telling the congregation? How true is that in terms of what a service provider will tell that person? So putting those two entities together to learn with each other, they both need to educate each other.
With the courage to seek out effective solutions by asking tough questions, our community will be better prepared to deal with the devastating toll of substance abuse, mental illness, and incarceration, replacing misunderstanding and punishment with hope and recovery.
You have to believe in yourself in order to succeed. And that's what I did.
I can remember when she had given me the keys to her apartment. I mean, things that money can't buy. You can't buy that. That's stuff you have to earn, people's trust. And that was a process in getting my mother to trust me again.
The message we need to better communicate is that God is already forgiven you. God is already forgiven you. Forgive yourself and begin now the steps. Do the things you need to do and watch the blessings just flow.
I may not be the guy with the flashy cars and the big name, but I'm an average Joe on the street who went through the system, who went through what he had to go through, and now he's trying to survive. And I have enough compassion in my heart to encourage them and make them understand that, hey, they have a right to exist and they can achieve.
I think all communities need to look up to someone who has perhaps put together a program that's going to help them with their mental wellness. As a matter of fact, I like to say emotional wellness.
We have to start reinvesting in the very foundation of our nation, and that's its people. Now, that means their health, their mental health, their economic and intellectual growth. And when we start looking at that, then America will be the great country that it can be.